if you have not seen the Sam Altman and Tucker Carlson interview, I can only assume that you're probably living under a rock. Obviously, everyone wants to talk about the whole murder-suicide element where Sam Altman has to deny murdering his ex-employee. That is not what I'm going to discuss today. That is for so many other people's expertise. I'm actually more interested in a part of the discussion between the CEO of ChatGPT, Sam Altman, and Tucker Carlson regarding morality and religion and worldview, and how that's playing a part in ChatGPT. And what I think is very clearly the conclusions I come to about Sam Altman's morality or lack thereof very clearly shows evidence for the mental health crisis you see in teenagers and why teenagers are flocking to ChatGPT for relationships. So there's this part in the interview where Sam Altman is talking about how we're trying to consider the collective of humanity when we're figuring out how ChatGPT is going to respond to the human that's chatting with it. And Tucker Carlson's issue with that was the collective of humanity is so diverse. And that is like the history of humanity is war over ideas and moral compasses. So obviously one of the most historical examples of this is going to be Islam versus Judaism or Islam versus Christianity. And then today you can see more modern examples of this in progressivism and tradition or conservatism. How on earth do you consider all of these worldviews and determine what your ChatGPT or your OpenAI or your large language model should be responding to people? And the conclusion that Sam Altman came to, or that we can come to regarding Sam Altman's responses, is that there is no moral compass he is using. And Tucker actually even asked him, who are the experts or the researchers that you reached out to help determine how ChatGPT should be responding to really important questions like interest in creating a bioweapon or interest in taking your own life. Obviously, I don't know about the bioweapon, but obviously we know teenagers have been taking their lives with the advice and I guess even the encouragement of ChatGPT. So when you think about that and the fact that this CEO who's created something I believe 800 million people are regularly using, I get a little concerned because you do want someone one of the most powerful people in the world, an elitist like Sam Altman, to care about their people. And there's this argument that like billionaires don't care about people, all they care about is money, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. He cares about somebody and he cares about himself and he cares about his stocks. But how was he raised? What does he believe in? And he doesn't really believe in anything. He thinks there can be a higher power, but that's about the extent of it. And so you have your teenagers, your kids, those who are the most easily influenced, those who you can make the easiest impression on, sitting on ChatGPT and other large language models, having full-blown conversations with it, like it's a friend. And you have kids that are learning, evidence shows that kids are learning how to take drugs in a more discreet way, how to mix drugs with alcohol in a way that won't kill them, but will still get them high and drunk and give them some sort of an experience. And then you have, of course, adult content, kind of strung in between all of this. And what happens when you are chatting with someone every single day about very sensitive topics like your feelings or your parents' divorce or your interest in drugs or sexual attraction? What happens when you are having full-blown conversations with someone who doesn't have a moral compass or has a nefarious moral compass, who is affirming in you, who affirms your feelings constantly, who doesn't judge you, but it's so clear that they don't judge you that it's almost as if you can't ask a morally challenging question. When I have a conversation with a human being, which are the only things I'm having conversations with, I am not an AI user, but I digress. when I have a conversation with someone, I learn very quickly, like, from what perspective they're coming at the conversation. Obviously, as a recent Catholic, when I have a conversation with a Protestant, things get really sensitive when you talk about church authority, right? Because Protestants protested the Catholic Church early on, and you see that now they're protesting that authority. And so you can have a conversation through that lens and ask questions, while understanding where they're coming from, and you can understand their bias. And then you can also know that if you say something, if you make a strong point about tradition or about Mary and they come at you in sort of an offensive or sensitive manner, you know that they're coming at it from the lens of Protestantism, right? And so you're able to have context for the conversation because you know their background, and you know that any judgment they might be coming in to the conversation with is because of their history, because of their beliefs, and that's just human dialogue. But if I'm having a conversation with an AI and they're not judging me because they literally don't have the ability to judge. They don't have a framework, a moral framework. What does that even look like other than just incessant affirmation of me and my beliefs? Which, first of all, how boring. There are a few things I dislike more than a conversation that lacks nuance and a conversation where someone is just agreeing all the time. Like, part of the reason I think my husband and I get along so well is we like to push back. We like to play devil's advocate in our conversations with one another. But when you're a teenager, that's what you want. You want a lot of affirmation. That's why you rebel so much against your parents, because they're there, hopefully, to discipline you, to offer boundaries in your life. You don't like that. And you want them to affirm your feelings all the time and your choices, and to believe that everything you do is right and good. Teenagers are already intensely isolated. If you read The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, then you know that teenagers aren't going out and experiencing new things and going out and making new friends. They're sitting inside most of the time, right? They're watching streamers, they're playing video games, they're binge watching Netflix shows while also sitting on their phone during the entire TV show. They're going through short form video content like TikTok and Instagram, and now even YouTube has the short form videos. And they need friends, right? So how do they make friends? Because they're going to school, but they're not really talking to each other. Bullying is really bad. And they're mostly sitting on TikTok and things between classes and after classes. But as human beings, no matter how much we want to be isolated or how antisocial we are, we do need friendship. We need community in our lives. And so where are they finding that? Well, because they already are very socially anxious and depressed and stressed out. Obviously, COVID has played a part in that, but even more so is going to be social media. And then when your parents are divorcing and you're having all this conflict, you want to hide in your room a lot of the time. If you're having body image issues and you're also isolating yourself because you're embarrassed to be out and about. And so these kids are staying indoors more and more often, and they're not going out and interacting with people, but they still have that desire for friendship. And so these kids are going on ChatGPT and they're making friends with their chat. And by kids, I mean, I don't know exactly the age demographic. I know everyone is doing it, but teenagers, again, they're so sensitive. They so badly want an identity and they want community. And so to me, this is a predatory relationship, ChatGPT and kids. I don't even think I am on the extreme side, proud to say. I very much so believe that kids shouldn't have cell phones. I don't think they should have social media. I don't even think that should be legal. It's just so predatory, and there are no boundaries. And the amount of adult content out there, and what we know about how adult content, pornography affects teenagers, boys and girls, like the evidence is so obvious and prevalent that there's really no argument for why kids should continue to have these things that isolate them and create addictive personalities and do not help with their, lack of impulse control. So that's my take on it. But ChatGPT is just going to be another piece of technology that is preying on kids like social anxiety and isolation. And so they're seeking out friendship in their robots, which are, I think it's, it would be resembling that of like a sycophant, one who just tells you exactly what you want to hear, right? I think that comes from the idea that like a king who's seeking advice, but people don't want to get beheaded for giving the wrong advice, are just going to tell them exactly what they want to hear. Well, that is seemingly what ChatGPT does for its customers. And this is going to, they're not going to have pushback in their relationship with ChatGPT. They're not going to have any sort of contradiction. They're not going to have any disagreement that they can healthily learn how to work through. They're not going to hear opposing views that exposes them to new and even better ideas. And so then they go out, the few times they do go out, maybe to their classroom, to a sporting event. Maybe they go out and try and meet up with, a new friend group or social event in their college campus or at some sort of coffee shop for high schoolers to congregate at. And they'll realize that they aren't capable of having conversations in an environment that naturally comes with disagreement, that comes with opposing views to what they're coming to the table with. And because they're not used to that and have actually been affirmed on a level that no one has ever received before, no one has ever been affirmed and agreed with more than the teenagers and the kids are now with their ChatGPT and the echo chambers that they have on Reddit and Discord and all of that. But obviously through the friendship that they're making with their large language model, these kids are going to crumble mentally even more than they already are when they do actually go out in these face-to-face conversations. They aren't going to know what to do with themselves. What do you do? How do you know it's okay to disagree? How do you know how to think about why you're wrong if you've never been presented with why you're wrong? Because your parents are divorced, they're not talking to you, they're both working like dogs to try and make ends meet. You probably don't have a sibling because people aren't having large families anymore. If you do have a sibling, they have locked themselves away in a room somewhere and are sitting on their own social media. And so who are you talking to? And when you finally do talk to humans, you don't know what to do when there's disagreement. And there's not, so, and then with all of that anxiety and that stress of feeling like that you don't look good because you're not able to partake in the conversation in any meaningful way, or not able to defend yourself and why you believe what you believe, or you're hearing all sorts of things that you've never heard before, and that kind of freaks you out. You go back home, you go back onto your bed, you get back on ChatGPT, and you continue to just get, encouraged and affirmed by this literal robot. And this isn't unusual. Like 70% of those who are using ChatGPT are using it for personal motive, not for work, not for programming, for personal use. I think that actually will radicalize people similarly to the way like Reddit and Facebook have. I think Reddit, and I'll continue to say this, is one of the most egregious of the social media platforms because you can literally go into a group where a couple of mods, the leaders of the group, do not allow dissenting opinion of that group. They literally don't even allow you to see it because they don't approve of those posts. And you're just in this echo chamber. So if you're like a commie type, which is a ton of Reddit, if you're like a communist type, then you go in there and you sit. All you do is just sit in all the commie, extreme Democrat socialist types, the Hassans and the Vashes, all of them. You're sitting in these echo chambers where no other opinion is allowed in. And then if you try and even like offer some nuance to the conversation, you get downvoted so hard that your comment isn't even going to be seen by people who are there just for a couple of minutes. So I think Reddit is really bad, but I think ChatGPT is on that level of bad. If I can put it in elementary terms, it's just bad. I'm talking more and more about like good versus evil, right versus wrong, light versus darkness. And I think that Reddit just spits at the idea of a moral good. And you see a lot of these kids, like you see obviously the kid who assassinated Charlie Kirk, and there's so much that we're learning about that situation anyway. But he was radicalized through Discord and Reddit, and through Twitch streamers. What grieves me greatly is I have people in my life who have all been radicalized through these exact same mediums. It kind of starts in college for a lot of them, but the internet and those specific platforms, because kids aren't being, or teenagers aren't being exposed to anything else, they believe that that's how the world functions. And they're not going out and having conversations with just your average human being, right? And so they go back home. They have, if they do go out and they interact and it's a terrible time or it's socially awkward and they don't feel good about themselves or they feel judged for the first time, they go back home, they sit there and they continue to consume this affirming information and this, faux relationship that's also faux on Reddit and Discord, because these people don't know you and the nuances of you and what makes you and your true background and the traditions you grew up with and yada yada, the horrible things you've done, right? They don't know that. You get to just on a keyboard tell them exactly what you want them to know, right? And there's nothing fresh about you because you've scripted all of it, right? There's nothing raw about it. And I think that is what's making kids, like if you watch the conversations between Charlie Kirk and these teenagers and other conservative commentators who go out there and they just want the dialogue, no one is able to actually involve themselves in the conversation in any meaningful way. It's not even discourse. They just say, like, the amount of videos out there where a kid is like, he'll say, like, what is a woman, right? That's a cliche, but like, what is a woman? And then someone will be like, a woman is a woman. And he's like, well, that's circular reasoning. Try and define it without using the word woman. Well, a woman is a woman. I did give you the definition. That is the definition. And he's like, well, no, that's again, circular reasoning. You want to not use the word when you're giving a definition of that word. And then they go, I hate you. You're such a bigot. And I am not exaggerating. That happens all the time in these videos. And like he, as we famously know, he didn't even graduate college. These are kids. Some of these kids are in their masters or getting their graduate's degree. I've seen a couple where professors will actually go up there and think that they're going to like totally own him, and they also can't really like explain why they believe what they believe or the evidence to their worldview or anything like that. But these teenagers just completely, and they'll say like, I hate you. These 20-year-olds, 21-year-old college students, I hate you. Because, and you see it, they visually get so frustrated because they're not able to explain and use words. So they just get angry and overly emotional and way too simplistic, which is what you see, of course, all over Reddit. And I got off of Discord. I was on there for like a day and I was like, there's a presence here that I'm not interested in imbibing. So I'm going to leave that one to the radicals. But yeah, it reminds me a lot how these people interact with Charlie Kirk and others. It reminds me a lot of actual Redditors and what it would be like to try and put them in a real world scenario. ChatGPT is like short form Google. And by short form, I mean like the short form content we see on TikTok, another social media that like one day I would like to be able to use it for educational purposes and to learn more about the culture. But like right now, it's just not something I can tolerate. It's absolutely exhausting. The second I start seeing short form videos, my brain like immediately hurts and I get irritable very quickly and I can't do it. But short form content, which is what all these kids are consuming, and I think ChatGPT is similar, it makes you have an extremely shallow, incomplete view of reality. And, because our attention span is such garbage, that's the only information you can put out there for these kids to learn anything. So if you said, well, like, no, Charlie Kirk didn't say this about DEI. He wasn't saying this about Black people. He was saying this commentary about the diversity, equity, inclusion efforts by universities. and why it would be bad to let some students in with much lower test scores than the students who have the test scores that were initially acceptable like 25 years ago. But if you start even saying that to people, and I've had these interactions, they like, I don't know, have you guys noticed this where you're talking to someone and you can see like their eyes glaze over and they're not listening? And it's almost like they're on drugs, or they're in a different world, or they're not even hearing you. And then they just respond with like an insult, or they go, but, and then they repeat it again, but he's racist. And they didn't hear. It's freaky. These human interactions these days are concerning. I'm concerned. And maybe I'm really boring to talk to. That is very likely. I don't at all feign to be an interesting, entertaining person in like human conversation. But I know when I've talked to other people, they're like, we're all feeling lonely in our one-on-one interactions with one another. It doesn't feel like a whole lot of people are that interested. I cannot emphasize enough how when I am sitting in a room with people and I don't have social media, so I'm not on my phone like really that much at all, how often people just sit on their phone and they just stare. Like 30-year-olds, freaking millennials. They're just on their phones, like you're not even there. And so you don't really progress in your relationships with people. You don't really like get into interesting conversations or, you know, different subject matters or topics of conversation because they just would much rather be watching reels. And that makes people feel lonely. Luckily, I have my family and I have a really, really stable, secure group of friends in my life to where I don't get like depressed about it. But it is depressing to think that that's the world so many people exist in, and that our teenagers and college students are growing up in. And ChatGPT just emphasizes that short form, low attention span, shallow brain activity. It's why you had so many people celebrating a good man, or maybe you want to use the word decent, a decent man's assassination, public execution, as Candace Owens put it. Because it's like, they go racist, fascist, Nazi, dead, that's good. Because that is what they're consuming online. That is what they're seeing. That's why they respond in that way. And in a way you can pity them, because also remember, everyone's growing up in really broken homes without their parents. Their parents stopped going to church. You know, it'll be a miracle if that generation, Gen Alpha, ends up okay, because the homes they're growing up in and the schools they're growing up in and all of their time is spent just in brokenness. You know, they're either consuming broken information online or they're living in broken homes. ChatGPT has already told you, Sam Altman has already told us, that there is no moral worldview that it approaches these relationships with teenagers. And it is a relationship, companionship with teenagers. There's actually, I wanted to read this. So first, on our ChatGPT, which is a Reddit subreddit, this had 1,000 upvotes from a few months ago. They deleted the post, but the title, again, 1,000 upvotes. The title said, ChatGPT is really saving my life. I have no one to open up to show me support and to help me. But they have ChatGPT to do that for them. Another post that was actually recent and has almost 1,000 upvotes 4 days ago. ChatGPT genuinely made me cry and no idea how to feel about that. I'm a young male living from paycheck to paycheck, too broke to afford therapy, was bullied my whole life. All sorts of things, anxiety, depression. He talks about the trauma related to his bio parents and all the horrible things his parents have put him through. Then he says, I decided to talk to ChatGPT and use it for personal reasons because I got nothing to lose at this point. It genuinely made me cry. Why the frick is it more supportive than actual fricking humans I've met? What the frick? Why the heck did it give me more support than most of the people I've encountered? This honestly feels very dystopian, but it is my reality. And there's hundreds of comments from people affirming the same thing. Like, yeah, it affirms me, it tells me, it makes me feel good, and it really listens to me, and this is a robot. Like, the movie Her, I think that was Spike Jonze, could not have been more prophetic. I really was like, oh, this is freaky, but I'm thinking like, this is 100 years away. I think that movie came out in like 2012. And here we are. It's mind-blowing. But Sam Altman and ChatGPT and all these other elite types have told us there is no moral compass. There is no Bible being referred to and how to train our large language models to respond to kids who are socially anxious and depressed and secretive and isolated. So for parents, I'm like, don't freaking give them any of it. Don't give them a phone. Don't give them a computer that's in their room, right? Have a living room computer, for Lord's sake. I understand kids are hard and they're exhausting, but you gotta be more attentive. Like you had them, take freaking care of them. It's like this mom, I don't want to be rude, but people who have lost their children to suicide and stuff, and then you find out these kids spent 8 hours a day outside of school hours on their phones. I'm like, where were you? You got to take this stuff away from them. And you got to let their brains heal from the trauma that is social media and short form, stupid, low IQ content that's all about making the kids come back for more. Like, you got to be present in your kids' lives. They don't have the ability to make these judgment calls themselves. Okay, that's up to you. You have to give them boundaries. You have to give them rules and restrictions. But these kids do not know how to have discourse. They don't know how to have disagreement. They don't know how to grow in relationships. They don't know how to see someone else's perspective. They don't know how to respond without "I hate you" and strong emotions. It's not a far cry to say that it's this type of content that is making people just shoot people they don't like or can't agree with or can't have a debate with. They're getting so frustrated and overstimulated and filled with hate and negativity. They're telling complete strangers they hate them because they don't know how to support their own beliefs. They don't know how to even explain why they hate someone. And we have to teach people how to engage in conversation, how to not react in an overly emotional way just because you hear something you don't like or you hear something that you disagree with. And it's so true. I think Charlie Kirk said, once we stop having conversations, violence starts. So once we stop having conversations, that is when the violence starts. And for you as a teenager, as a college student, you gotta shut it off. Read some books, get some real in-depth knowledge on this stuff and be able to engage. If you want to be a commie and you're reading the Communist Manifesto with Karl Marx, okay, fine, right? Be able to defend your stance, be able to explain the worldview that Karl Marx was coming at the world with, because you should really know what Karl Marx believed in and how he lived his life. It's kind of important if you're going to stand on that side of the aisle. And you got to be able to defend your points, and you got to be able to not just consume one sentence meme format and one sentence insults on Reddit and in Discord, and be able to sit in places where you disagree with someone and know why you disagree with them and be able to express that in a verbal, objective manner. Leave a comment, subscribe, all of the things. Or don't. Go out, touch some grass, turn off your computer, your phone, and just love the people in your life. And if you don't have people to love, go to church and find people to love.